reporting, and patients will only listen to the treating doctor at the end of the day.
No, the problem is many doctors, they send and certain irrelevant investigation. If we counter ask, they'll be hesitant. There'll be a list of investigation which will be unrelated to the symptoms.
The B2B models always has its own challenges, doctor. At the end of the day, because when a treating doctor refers a patient to you, it becomes your B2B arrangement, right? So
Yeah.
in a healthcare, B2C will never work in a healthcare, let me tell you honestly, because patients are not empowered and they are not knowledgeable enough to take decisions when it comes to healthcare actually. So it has to be a B2B always.
Now, how do you think if it thinks this diagnosing things are nationalized at somewhere from this centrally and done something like that? It will be very
Regulatory,
useful.
at a regulatory level, lot many changes have got to be impressed upon. And see, that is why the industry sessions always help. When the industry sessions happen, when all the stakeholders participate and join, it really adds a lot of value, and then the voice will be heard ultimately. Where are the business sessions happening? Honestly, ask me, because in your pathology diagnostic space, you all go for your CME programs. You all
No,
attend.
I failed. I never into any cut practice and all. I just kept running. Doctors and relatives, they come, but never they refer the patient. Then I shifted my focus onto the blood banks, worked in blood bank.
Okay.
I in a medical college. Then like that only I finished my career. Now because this session I was interested to only to impress
Thank
upon
you.
the COVID system coming. We should the
Thank you.
next generation develop something more ethical and more useful to the society at a
Yes,
very reasonable
absolutely.
price.
Ask any biotechnology student or a biology student. They are saying bioterrorism is here to stay.
Yeah.
And they are saying bioterrorism, you don't need weapons, okay, to fight. All you need is bioterrorism. So we won't be surprised if you're going to have one pandemic every year also.
That is too much.
Unfortunately, that's the state of
Very
affairs.
bad. Yeah.
Healthcare has to inspire the communities, the complete ecosystem, doctor.
And
The
no,
day that
this
happens, many things get into an auto-correction mode
no,
automatically.
this healthcare and this medical field as such should have a very good high standard level, so that common people even look at that level. Those people involved in this healthcare and medical as a role models.
Right.
They will be the society's models.
Mm-hmm.
So to improve the society at a large in an ethical way, that should be streamlined in a very decent fashion. That is
Yes.
my feeling.
We will discuss. We will discuss and debate, and maybe people are just still joining. Can
Yeah.
we wait for another 5 minutes, sir? Actually, because we're still finding people joining.
Sure, we can.
Yeah. Yeah, you all celebrated International Pathology Day yesterday. Most of the pathologists here.
Yeah.
We missed wishing you all yesterday, and today, in fact, I was wishing everybody.
We had an awareness campaign there.
I know. I saw Dr.
Yeah,
Kulkarni shared it. It
yeah,
was very
Prasad.
nice. And it is very nice. I think your association and BPS Raj, you're really doing it. You brought a different dimension to community
Yeah,
education. You're
that was
doing.
running. That was running throughout the day
Yeah, I
on
know.
TV, television, and medias.
Dr. Kulkarni shared. Only thing is, it was all in Marathi. I couldn't read.
Okay, that's true.
multiple sessions are happening today at various places, I guess.
Mm.
Okay. Dr. Rohit Jain, good evening.
Good evening, madam.
Am I
Good
audible?
evening.
Am I
Yes,
audible actually?
Yeah. Initially, there was some glitch with my system.
Technical glitch on your mic. Actually, there was an issue. That's why I was waving from here.
No, I could not see earlier, madam.
No issues.
Good evening. Good evening, Dr. Rohit.
Good evening, Dr. K. Sir. Good evening. We have 33 participants as of now. 34.
No, it will increase actually.
Yes, yes. It will increase in another 5 10 minutes.
So shall we start or what? Shall we start or what do we do? Is there an echo in my voice? Is there an echo in
Yes,
my
yes.
voice?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Just a second. Just a second. Is this better now? Is this
Yeah.
better now?
Yeah.
Still echoing, ma'am.
Still echoing, ma'am. Is this better? Is this better?
No, it's echoing. No, it's echoing.
Just wondering what's wrong.
What's wrong? These webinars also need accreditation.
You're also echoing.
So there is a problem with the system, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
System.
I guess is it the Prema, can you and the idea is to improve the confidence of the ecosystem on standards, on certifications, accreditations, and quality. So we have scheduled a series of sessions whole of this month jointly with participation from various industries and with the support of the industry bodies. So today's session is exclusively for medical testing laboratories under healthcare services. We had a session yesterday for healthcare products, which is for medical devices quality. And today is for healthcare services. And we have picked up medical testing labs because the recent COVID episode has really brought to light so many things, and we thought it is high time to have an engaging conversation with the industry on this. And we have reached out to the Pathologist Association, Maharashtra Pathologists and Microbiologists Association, and we have also reached out to Practicing Pathologist Society from Rajasthan. We have also reached out to Quality and Accreditation Institute for joining this industry engagement. And we represent from the Consultants Association, which is Consultants Consortium of Chennai, which is an association for management system consultants. And we have also invited key speakers who have been in this domain conformity assessment structure for many years. And we do have Mr. Anil Javri with us today. So today's session is actually about to discuss and to improve the quality focus of the laboratories. What is it that actually the medical laboratories in the country need to improve their quality focus? So the whole discussion is about, do they need certifications on quality, or do they need accreditations on quality, or do they have to focus on the spec given by the regulatory body, which is CEA-FU, the Clinical Establishments Act, which had come out with a clear spec for the medical testing laboratories in the country. The spec, that spec also has a beautiful definition on the quality that needs to be maintained. What is it that the laboratories need? And at least this is one conformity assessment structure, which is the oldest in the country. NABL was actually the largest was NABCB and Accreditation Board, and then followed by NABL, almost about 20 plus years old, or close to 25 years. And the largest accreditation structure we have in the country. And we do have parallel accreditation bodies in the country. We do have alternative conformity assessment organizations like QAI. So the today's session and the focus is actually to get the insights. And today it's purely a discussion forum, a discussion format to get your inputs and ideas and suggestions also, like what is it that is needed. And maybe let me just start the session by thanking you all for joining us today and welcoming you all once again. Let me just quickly introduce the panelists for today's discussion. Rehma, can I have the slides, please?
Yes, ma'am.
So we do have our key panelist today, Mr. Anil Javri, and sir was the former CEO of NABCB. NABCB is the National Accreditation Board for certification bodies and the oldest and the largest accreditation body in the country. We always call this as a parent structure, basically. And sir was ex-CEO of NABCB, and he is also a member of UNFCCC CDM accreditation panel. He is a member of the Yoga Certification Board, and he is a chairman of SE GCPCS CDSA, and he is a lead assessor in NABCB and a lead evaluator in APAC, and he is also an IAF evaluator and an expert in the conformity assessment framework across the globe, and he is our mentor also to the Consultants Association. For all consultants, sir is our mentor actually. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we do have from the conformity assessment representative, we do have Dr. B.K. Rana, the CEO from Quality and Accreditation Institute. So Dr. Rana is a former director and CEO in charge of NABH from Quality Council of India. And he's also a board member of ISQA. That is, ISQA is the stamp for quality in healthcare. And he's ISQA External Evaluation Association, member of the association, and Asian Quality in Healthcare, which is ASQA. And he was also an elected chairman of Accreditation Council of ISQA, and he served as a president of ASQA in 2011 and 12. Is a founding member of IAQS, which is an International Academy of Quality and Safety. And he's an international consultant and expert for WHO, World Bank, ADB, USAID, ISQA, UNFCCC, GIZ, and several other national and international organizations. He's an expert in establishing healthcare accreditation body, laboratory accreditation body, implementing quality management systems, accreditation requirements, and standards development in the field of quality improvement and patient safety. He holds a PhD in biochemistry and a diploma in German and postgraduate diploma in hospital and health management. Welcome, Dr. Rana. And we do have Dr. Rohit Jain. Dr. Rohit Jain is a secretary from Practicing Pathologists Society from Rajasthan. And he's a consultant pathologist in Santokba Durlabji Memorial Hospital in Jaipur. He's got about 11 years experience, postgraduate in hematology, bone marrow pathology, and he's an expert in handling the legal issues concerning medical diagnostic laboratories. And he's been fighting for the rights of pathologists in India since 2012, and we see him speaking at several forums and regularly touching upon various issues which are affecting the professionals. And he's included in the Power List 2018 by the Pathologist magazine amongst 100 most influential people in pathology in the world. And he's also conferred with Young Oncologist Travel Grant Award by American Radium Society and California for his MD thesis. Welcome, Dr. Rohit Jain.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Next panelist is Dr. Jagdish Keskar. Doctor is a practicing pathologist and from Maharashtra Association of Pathologists and Microbiologists. And he's been practicing as a consultant pathologist at Penn Raigad since 1998. And Keskar Diagnostic Services is his business venture. And he's also a president of Practicing Pathologist Forum, and then he's a member from Maharashtra Pathologist Association also. I was really surprised when I saw his connect with the quality. So he's an internal auditor of an ISO 15189 and Lean and Six Sigma Green Belt. Very rarely we come across pathologists with all this actually. Good doctor, we are glad. And then more than 100 presentations on legal and quality aspects of pathology practice. I heard him speaking at many forums, and they're doing a real good work for the industry. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Keskar, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. So we have Mr. Dinesh Jain. He's our fellow consultant and been a senior professional from the consulting domain from Delhi. So he's a director of AAD Management Consultants Private Limited. And Mr. Jain is a graduate from IIT Kanpur. And he's our senior colleague from the consulting domain. And he's been working very closely with the diagnostic sector, both with medical testing labs as well as imaging services in driving the quality focus. So we have also invited him today because he's also part of the conformity assessment framework, just to get his inputs and views about what's happening at the ground level. And so these are the panelists for today, and I will be the moderator for the session. I'm Rama Venugopal. I'm the president of Consultants Consortium of Chennai. I'm also a management consultant. I head a consulting organization from Chennai, which is a 31-year-old organization. I've been working with the healthcare space domain for almost about close to about 20 years, working with various healthcare organizations on implementing various management systems, actually guiding the industry. So we can, it is a discussion forum. As I mentioned, we can start with the topic and the session for today. We can have the question and answers towards the end. We request the participants to leave their queries or questions, if any, in the chat box. After the panel discussion, actually, we can take up the questions also. This discussion thread is basically about, as I was mentioning, the importance of medical testing laboratories as actually has come to focus during the pandemic time, recent pandemic time. And it's not that the medical testing laboratories were not there earlier. They're always a part of the system, but the real importance of the structure and the diagnostics industry focus has really come to the limelight during the pandemic. The system also has shown both the strengths as well as the weaknesses of the diagnostic segment, and especially more so with reference to the quality infrastructure in the country. Very closely held discussions with the industry and various stakeholders, and the kind of conversations that are happening everywhere actually made us realize that, you know, there are huge gaps, and especially with reference to the quality infrastructure, which we have to really discuss today and touch upon this. So I will start with the first round of question. The first question is actually about, this is something which we've been hearing in all the forums, that India has about more than 1 lakh standalone medical laboratories. This 1 lakh figure has been there for the last 10 years, yes, honestly. And everybody talks about 1 lakh because there is no regulatory framework in the country. There is no system where actually somebody can go and register, and then, you know, where the data is captured. So it's this 1 lakh is there, but technically there is a discussion again in the forums that, you know, the real number may be somewhere about 3 lakhs plus also. So we are talking about that 1 lakh laboratories as a standalone medical laboratories. But in addition to this, we do have, when we say laboratories, we do have labs which are attached to the hospitals and various other healthcare organizations. Out of this, so many labs that we have in the country, when we are talking about quality infrastructure, basically the quality infrastructure, when we mean here is the certifications and the accreditations structure in the country. Where do we stand? Actually, technically, what are the real numbers, actual numbers? I just wanted to show you. Just give me 1 minute. Rehma, I have sent you a table. Can you please share it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this is the. Is the table visible?
Yeah.
See, this is basically, I've just taken some numbers which are available in the public domain. So we are talking about a structure where in a country where we do have accreditations, we do have certifications. See, as consultants, we can tell you that when it all started, maybe 20 years ago, we only had an ISO 9001 certification those days. Even you still find laboratories with this ISO 9000 certificate hanging everywhere. And that was a certification. And then came much later came the accreditation, and which is accreditation board was NABL, but the standard is an ISO standard. It is ISO 15189, and accreditation board in the country is NABL. And then came the accreditation. But after the accreditation was there, again, the last 6-7 years, again, we have seen another certification. So we've just captured everything, and I just wanted to show you the numbers. These are the numbers. That's all. There is no other number in the country. So we have taken the accreditation numbers from the NABL portal. The data is available. I have taken the data till September 30th, where the number is somewhere about 1,645 accredited labs. And out of this 1,645, if you see, at least 300, 400 got added now only for the molecular testing. Otherwise, the number was always around 1,100. And this is the data which is there. And out of this 1,600, if you see, the hospital attached laboratories, labs which are attached to hospitals are accredited. The ones which are accredited is about some 733. And then you're talking about standalone labs. The standalone labs which are accredited are about some 864. And even out of this 864, if you honestly ask me, almost about 30 to 40% is again belonging to corporate chains or the chain of laboratories which are covering their multi locations for accreditation. And then as on the rest of the laboratories, basically they are from factory laboratories which are inside the factory setup industries, and then clinical research organizations where a lot of pharma and biotech companies and CROs also focus on accreditation for their laboratory. So this is the number. And we do have another scheme for certification called entry level by NABL, but the data is not available in the public domain as to how many labs are certified under that. Can you just move down a little, Rehma? Yeah. No, just go up a little. Yes. The next one, what we have seen is NABH. NABH is also an accreditation board for hospitals and healthcare services providers. So NABH is also issuing certification for the medical laboratories called MedLab, a program. This was there around the corner for the last, for about 6-7 years, if I'm right. And they have certified around some 98 labs. Again, the data that I have picked up from the public domain data. And almost, if you see 90-95% of the labs that NABH is certified are all standalone diagnostic labs. Very few are actually from a hospital base. They're all standalone diagnostic labs. And then we do have another accreditation body in the country, which is QAI. So QAI runs a scheme for medical laboratories accreditation, which is a new entrant into this space and a new player. And so they have got about close to about 20 laboratories or less than 20 labs to their credit. And they're also accrediting both standalone labs as well as laboratories which are attached to the healthcare organizations. Come down, Rehma. And the last one is an interesting data because we do have certifications, which is ISO 9001 certification. I have taken a random number because, to be very honest, again, this is the data which is not available anywhere. But whatever I'm seeing in the market, wherever we have seen, we discuss in the consultants' corner. Generally, you find every laboratory, the smallest or the tiniest, also hangs an ISO 9000 board in the center. So it's just a random number, but my take is this will be much, much higher. This may be around actually about some 10,000 to 15,000 certificates also. Definitely around 5,000 to 10,000 will be the number. See, and there's the last line I have added that almost all the certificates, either we call them as unauthentic or a fake. Majority of them belong to this sectors and categories. Now we can close this, Rehma. I just wanted to show you those numbers actually. So with all these numbers that I have shown you, whatever we see actually, we can say for sure that having this conformity assessment structure for 20 years, we still have that number only around that 5,000 plus or 5,000 to 6,000 in the last 20 years. See, certifications and accreditations, we always say is a validation on the management systems practices. So when a lab says I have a certification, I have an accreditation, it means that a third party assessment of the system is done. It is a safe assurance check to the users. But why is it that, the number is still hovering only at this? What is the reason for this? This is the question I would like to ask to all the panelists one by one. What is the reason for this lack of quality focus? Aren't laboratories expected to offer quality and safe care to communities? Now, I just would like to ask this question first to Sir, Mr. Anil Jowhary. because Sir knows about the conformity assessment structure so well, and an inspiring ecosystem should have produced more numbers, but it has not happened, and especially in a domain like healthcare. And just wondering why is it so? We would like to have your views.
Yeah, good afternoon, Rama. Thank you very much. Well, let me put it this way. I think we are debating these numbers, but before we debate these numbers, I think we should look at the basics, whether we are getting our basics right. To my mind, we are not getting our basics right, and therefore we are looking for solutions which are not sustainable in the long run and which are not producing results. To me, the first thing is any product or service which has health or safety implications for the general population ought to be under regulation. So our focus should be now, if you think medical labs is something which affects health of people, then it ought to be under regulation. It incidentally is in certain ways, it is. You have yourself mentioned about the CA and the minimum standards prescribed under that. The problem has been that post 1991, regulation became a dirty word in Indian bureaucracy, which is where the decision making takes place. So therefore, and I have experienced it personally, every time you suggested a regulation, the response would be, no, we don't want regulation. We don't want Inspector Raj. So the reluctance to go for regulations is very strong post 1991. It has taken several years, even in products, to realize that regulation is a necessity because it is in public interest. And therefore, now you see more regulations coming in on products also and on services also. In WTO TBT agreement, there are 5 grounds which are for products only, but they make a good reference for services also. They say that you can have regulation on grounds of health, safety, environment, deceptive trade practice, and national security. So if you use these grounds as parameters, you will realize that medical labs ought to be under regulation. Now it is, CA is there, but since it's under concurrent list, the states have to adopt. The states have not adopted, and therefore the implementation of that CA and its standards is absolutely unsatisfactory as of now. To my mind, all civil society, all consumer organizations, all professional bodies ought to be focusing on this part. The focus is missing. Instead, we focus on certification and accreditation, which to my mind is wrong focus. The second question is that accreditation, let's limit ourselves to medical lab accreditation as per ISO 18189. Accreditation is to international standards. So first we have to make an assessment for ourselves. Are all our labs capable of meeting ISO 15189? If the answer is yes, very good. Please go ahead, implement 15189 by law, and all labs are capable, so they will comply with, give them a reasonable time. But we know that that's not possible. That's not possible in the near run. So we need to fix what I would call minimum acceptable standards. That without these, you cannot function in the market, which is by law, which is under regulation. So even that has been recognized, let's face it, that has been recognized. CA has fixed some minimum acceptable standards under CA. So now you have 2 sets of clearly defined standards, one under CA, which are the minimum acceptable standards, and one 15189, which is an international standard. So international, now voluntary, so see, how does quality focus come? I have been spent 40 years now working in BIS, EIC, QCI, and seen it all. Seen the compulsory part, seen the voluntary part. There has to be a demand. That demand can come either by regulatory pressure, which is the strongest demand. If it is the demand of law, it happens more quickly. If it is not regulatory pressure, then it has to be market demand. Where will that market demand come from? The best possible is from the user. User will not use you unless you have certain credentials. Unless that demand builds up, the numbers will remain low. The procurement agencies can influence to a bit, but ultimately it's the user who influences. So the numbers on accreditation will remain low because A, as far as I am concerned, there's no market demand as such. There's no great market demand for it. B, it costs money because it's a third-party activity. Surely they'll charge, it costs money. So you will think whether I should spend money, what benefit does it get to me? If I'm surviving without accreditation, why should I go for accreditation? If I'm doing well enough without accreditation, I'll not go for accreditation. So there's a question of cost. also involved. And then there is question of meeting international standards. Am I capable of the cost is not only of recurring cost of certification or accreditation, but the cost also is in terms of initial investment. If I want to upgrade to this standard, there is a certain investment I have to do, certain kind of people I have to have, certain kind of equipment I have to have. That requires money. Do I want to spend or not? So to me, as far as medical labs are concerned, we ought to be focusing on the regulation part first. And I would forget accreditation for the time being. Let it grow. Yes, it will grow. As and accreditation bodies will market themselves, make it value added, it will grow. But the need for the government is a need for the good of the people is that medical labs ought to be brought under effective regulation. And there again, the question would arise, and I want to address that right away. Now, if it is under regulation, let's assume it's under regulation. Who checks compliance? One obvious option is the regulator, which is Department of Health in most states. This is expected to check compliance. So there is a need for manpower, training, etc., competent manpower within Department of Health, which as of now today it would not exist. Second option, you go for third party verification, which is a worldwide scenario now. Every regulator, whether it's in medical devices, in products, is very, very visible. In services also, it's becoming visible that you go for third party, which will add some cost. But who are the third parties? Should an accreditation body be that third party? Then my next question would be to NABL and to QAI, since Dr. Rana is here. I don't know if anybody from NABL has joined. I did ask them. I mean, if I was the chief of accreditation body, my answer would be no. My job is not regulatory compliance verification. I am here to promote excellence as per international standards, and that's not my job. I fear for the day if the accreditation bodies like NABL or QAI would fall into the trap of doing regulatory verification. Then if not these ABs, then where are the third party bodies? It will be, this is a good question. Where are the third party bodies?
Yes.
Let me give you one just analogous example to raise the issue, because we haven't debated. I mean, not in government, not anywhere. There are a whole lot of pollution control check centers all over the country. Hundreds of them. They are technically labs. I'm sure a lab expert would tell me they are labs. Who is going to check compliance, whether they meet minimum standards laid down by Ministry of Transport? Again, my answer again is not accreditation bodies. If they get into that, I can assure you that accreditation bodies will be diminished in stature if they do that. Now, if they don't do that, which is the third party? Where are the third parties? So I'll leave it at this point today. That where are the third parties? To me, the question is, we should not look at these numbers. We should be debating, spending more time on how minimum standards already laid down in the CA, which has recognized there's a need for minimum standards, can be implemented, can be verified, and at least that quality can come into medical labs before we talk about 15189. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very interesting insights. Maybe taking a cue from sir's points, I would like to ask Dr. Keskar. Mr. Jowhary was mentioning that laboratories should focus more on meeting the regulatory compliances, which is the minimum standards, which is laid down by CEA. If I'm right, the standards were laid down 2 years ago. May 2018, if I'm right, actually, minimum standards were introduced. Almost more than 2 years now. How effectively this regulatory requirements are verified, or maybe the state health authorities, are they really issuing licenses based on this minimum standards requirements? Of course, health is a state subject, we all know that, but there is a framework which is available at a national level. I just wanted to know from your side, do you think this minimum standards for which are introduced, is it a good spec? Is it maybe, which is the need of the industry? Is this what the industry really wanted? Whether the industry can really adapt to the spec? Your views, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rama. And thank you, Consultants Consortium of Chennai, for inviting me and allowing me to sharing the views. Dr. Anil has very clearly and very nicely explained here. I will say he had done half of my job by saying what is the role of accrediting body and what. He also insisted that focus is missing. Yes, definitely the focus is missing. Focus on quality is definitely missing, both from the laboratories and from the regulators and accrediting bodies and certifying bodies. What the accrediting and certifying bodies are doing, that they are trying to involve all the existing laboratories, whatever they be, mushrooming laboratories and corporate business laboratories who are working only for the money and not for the quality, and the pathologist independent laboratories, hospital side laboratories. Amongst these, I will say the laboratories run and owned by pathologists are mainly the laboratories which are maintaining quality to the mark. The remaining hospital side labs and mushroom laboratories, which are run by unauthorized persons also. And unfortunately, they have tie-ups with the corporate labs for the rest of the tests, which they are not doing. So these types, they are definitely compromising the quality. The quality doesn't come from certification, quality doesn't come from accreditation. They are the means to achieve quality for certain level, but they are not the only means. The quality starts from the intent to quality. The very important point is intent. You need to define that every product coming from my laboratory, every report coming from laboratory must be a quality report, and that happens only when the decision maker is a qualified person and authentic person. And quality and authenticity goes hand in hand. So this is the main thing. One is the intent to quality, and second is a continuous efforts to maintain and improve the quality. That also happens only when the person who is planning the quality and who is maintaining the quality is qualified enough and who knows that. The second, regulatory part, we only know the regulatory part that minimum standards have come through CEA, but Clinical Establishment Act has come, I think it is 2010 Act, and few years back. But our regulations are existing since 1956. It is Indian Medical Council Act and the related state medical council acts as per. So what are the regulations? That regulations is the minimum qualification required for running laboratory, certifying the report is a postgraduate qualification in pathology after an MBBS degree, and that is certified by, that is again affirmed by various high courts, say 7 to 8 high courts and Supreme Court also. But our focus is missing. We don't want to follow that regulatory things. We don't want to follow these things, and we are trying to find out the alternatives for that. What are the alternatives? To add other labs which are run by the other persons also, other than the pathologist also. So that is the issue where quality is compromising, and there are many persons who have vested interest in pathology business. They want to run the lab, they want to be a signatory authority, they want to be a business part of pathology other than pathologist. I will say other than pathologist, most of the persons are, or many of the persons are earning out of pathology business. So for that, business houses are running the laboratories, mushroom laboratories, illegal persons and unauthorized persons are running the laboratories. Their intention is not to maintain the quality, not to give the quality report, but their intention is to earn the money and the livelihood. That is the basic difference. When the intent is quality, then the quality will improve. Whether these certifications will help, that will definitely help to a certain extent, but not to fully. That certification and accreditation cannot be equated with the quality. Once we have achieved the accreditation, whether the accredited lab, every report coming from the accredited lab is quality report? No. They only confirm to the certain that you are maintaining these and these things and certain things. Again, the problem with accrediting bodies in our country, again, we will come to our country, our norms are not traceable to the international norms. What is ISO 15189? What we are seeing, we have modified it to a greater extent, and we have modified it in the way that these other labs can be accommodated, the remaining labs can be accommodated, and everybody can be accommodated. So here is where what the focus is missing. So we should focus on the quality, and the quality will come. Whether the regulations are required, but they are existing. New regulations are not required. Already required regulations are there. If policymakers decide that every lab in the country should be run by a qualified pathologist, and a pathologist, every test should be done under the supervision of qualified pathologist only, and then the only report will be released. But the same thing is given in the Madhya Pradesh High Court decision in Kamla Patel versus State of Madhya Pradesh in 2002. And we are in 2020, 21, and we are still to follow that things. But many of the authorities say that we should find an alternative to that. So this should not happen. So whatever is required for the quality and quality report is already defined in the law and regulations. And only we follow that only, it is more than sufficient. Thank you.
Interesting, very interesting insights, Dr. Keskar. Dr. Rana, I just would like to ask one question to you. Like Mr. Javri was mentioning that, like what is needed, at least his opinion and views, more than certification or accreditation, it is the minimum accessible standards of the regulatory spec that need to be complied with. And he also said that, the accreditation bodies or the certification bodies, they shouldn't be getting into this inspection business or checking the regulatory requirements, and some third parties have to do it. But do we have that kind of a structure in the country? Like when the state health authorities have to issue a license based on the minimum standard specification, when you say a third parties, who will go to the field and check if it is not the accreditation body? At least accreditation bodies or the certification bodies, they know the conformity assessment structure, what to check and what to do. At least they're all trained in this domain. Third parties, do you think that we have that kind of structure in the country, the readiness of the readily available resources or the readiness of the structure?
Thank you, Rama Madam. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity on the question, which is very burning and I would say very relevant. And I completely agree what Jory sir mentioned. In fact, the number which you have put up, and they are the numbers, they will keep numbers for many years. It has been in the past as well. And there would be only the estimation of 100,000 lab, and I would say 100,003 labs. Nobody can challenge me that you are saying wrong. I can say I am correctly. You go and verify whether I am right or wrong. So that is the situation. Only because we didn't have Clinical Establishment Act in the past, and whatever we had, we never implemented in totality, so that we don't know the numbers. So 2010 has seen the light of the day when Clinical Establishment Act was passed by our Parliament. 2010, and now we are sitting on 2020, 10 years. And hardly few states have adopted CEA, which was as it is by central government. Some states had adopted after some modifications. Some states are still thinking about it, right? But whatever states have adopted, if they have already started implementing it in real, scenario, we would have got some numbers that yes, by this time we have these many labs or enrolled and all these things. So that question will continue for maybe several years. Now, coming back to the same main question, what you asked, and Jory sir responded very well that, and in fact, if we say NABL, and I have a lot of attachment because I have been part of NABL when it was started and growing. It started me not from the beginning, but from the where when it started looking toward the international equivalence, 1999, 2000, right? So, and similarly with NABH, see what would happen in India is basically I see it's instead of growing from the building the basics, what Jory sir mentioned, building blocks, the basics, we have gone to the very advanced stage. All of a sudden, we have gone to the advanced stage. And in 99, when I joined NABL and we 8 officers joined, and he say, yo, we prepare for APLAC evaluation in June 2000. He said 6 months. 6 months we have to prepare for APLAC evaluation. And as I remember, I think I can vouch for that. I know the history. NCTCF started in 1984 under Department of Science and Technology. 84 to 97, it was registered. So many years took, and there were hardly few laboratories. And there was no medical laboratory at that time. 1998, 99, there was no medical laboratory. 99, 2000, 2-3 laboratories came in using 17025 because 15189 was not existing at that time. So 2000 we got APLAC MRA for NABL and in September, and then we kick off international standard ISO 15189 in 2003. For medical laboratory, 2003, 2004 was the year when medical laboratory standard was published by ISO, and we started off. So we started with that. Unlikely and comparatively with many other developing countries where quality and infrastructure has a proper strategy in place, and they started building the building blocks. And Jory sir will agree that there are still so many countries where funded by ADB, World Bank, and many international donors for building that quality infrastructure in place. So we started with that. And over last 20 years, if we start with 99 or 2000 for NABL, what efforts actually we took to building those blocks? We just running on 15189, and like he mentioned that the last thing which I like very much, and that is the key, is demand. Where is the demand generated? Where are the consumers asking, the patients asking that I will only go to the accredited hospital or the laboratory? If that demand is generated, you don't need any regulation to follow for going for accreditation. It will automatically will happen, and will happen with more determination and with more oversight of the patient rather than the accreditation body. So that demand has never been generated. Conducting few awareness program will not generate, and that awareness program will whom? For you, for me, for Jory Saab, for Rohit Jain, for Sandeep Yadav ji, for Archana. That's all. Actual consumer which are not aware of all these things, it is not generated. So I think the lapse has been that over a period of time we have, and same thing happened with NABL. We started with the high end of the standard, then we started looking down to go to the entry level and so. By that time the damage has already been done, and you can see that now people are running behind the or after the certificate. So Clinical Establishment Act requirement by CEA, central government or state government, those are the things should be focused by all state governments to be put into place. I can guarantee that there are 100,000 labs, you are saying 100,000 labs will not be even meeting this clinical establishment requirement prescribed in the standards, in terms of either infrastructure or in terms of the manpower, qualification and experience. So I think business is business, but business should also be seen as a growth proposition for the consumer and the entities which we are looking for. So even implementing the Clinical Establishment Act, and I think I remember very well, and I have noted down already, we have a discussion with Jory Saab and Brahma Madam, we were discussing about this Clinical Establishment Act, our group WhatsApp. Let's say we have already started this clinical establishment for basic composited laboratory a year and a half ago, even well before NABL has announced entry level. We got few takers, but their intention was not to improve, to be very honest. Then again say, no sir, can we get a certificate after getting into it? I say, you will get a certificate only when you meet these minimum requirements. And they ran away. Okay. So now we were thinking that why not for all 3 categories of Clinical Establishment Act, all medium and advanced laboratory, because even medium and advanced laboratories are there who will not be having pathologists as they required as per the Clinical Establishment Act, or even medium-sized laboratories may not be having infrastructure in place. So many things are there. But now the question what Jory have asked is, and that's a debatable, is who should be doing it if not the accreditation body? Because those things are debatable, but even something is better than nothing if you are able to clearly delineate your processes and systems to clearly define that, not creating confusions. And not one more thing before I hand over back to you. See, when we have ISO 15189 assessor, so it's always there, not okay, we'll use this assessor to send to the Clinical Establishment at compliance requirement checking. What will happen? It will do more damage than benefit. because these assessor will have the views of ISO 15189 rather than looking into the basic requirements of Clinical Establishment Act in toto. They will be asking for, have you done the participation in ICWAS? Have you done this? Have you done that? Say no, 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 no means the lab will not get even Clinical Establishment Act compliance certification. So that is what we thought, to have a clear-cut resources inbuilt with the Christian body or whosoever it is to match with that what activity we are going to perform in the market. Not just somebody is trained on the average, then he cannot walk on the ground. This is difficult for them to come down to that level. So I think that balance we can make, and that our efforts are. I think we are very clear in QI that how to support not only the establishment, healthcare establishment, but also the consumers in getting something what they deserve. Accreditation does not. I am very happy with that. The earlier speaker said that accredited laboratory does not mean you get everything right. Not necessary. It's not necessary. So it is already a continual improvement journey, and people have to learn and move. But unfortunately, in my 20 years career of this business, I have not seen continual improvement journey. It's just a certificate. Very honestly, I'm sorry to say that. Very few people have come to us. They say we want no certificate, but we want to improve, and that is why it evolves. So I think basics is to set the basics building block right, and then think of, yes, of course, many international provider will look into ISO 15189. They have an export business, they have something, no problem, that will continue parallelly. But setting the minimum, but I like it, mass minimum acceptable standard, MAS mass. I think those are the things which should be prioritized. By engaging like this, you have engaged many people here, by engaging with real push. Otherwise, insurance company will say, IRDA say I need it, or somebody will say, but they will say and then forget about it. Now accreditation body will continue awarding accreditations and nobody to see what is going on in the field. That's the biggest problem. Thank you so much. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rana. And very nice inputs. And Dr. Rohit Jain, I just picked up something from what Dr. Rana was saying. Various categories of laboratories which are there defined in the minimum standards. Your basic composite labs also, that was their certification scheme that they all have is only for that. We have 3 categories, I think, defined in the minimum standards, right?
Yeah.
I always used to wonder, since today's discussion is also about accreditation and certifications, why is it that we had that micro laboratories and small laboratories into the accreditation category? I always felt that micro labs and small labs have to be kept outside the accreditation framework, because industry's understanding of quality is accreditation. Their understanding of quality is a certificate. Okay. Now, since we do have this minimum standards, which is a very clearly defined spec, and it's very beautiful spec if you honestly ask me, don't you think it is a time for you all to make a representation to the accreditation framework to keep at least these 2 segments outside the accreditation framework? Because I don't think this micro labs and small laboratories should be inside your accreditation criteria at all. Since you're a practicing pathologist, I'm asking, you get your patients referred by your doctors and clinicians. Do they ever ask you that, do you have this accreditation certificate? Do you have this quality certificate? Do they ever ask you this? Do they ask these questions? Any of your walk-in patients, do they ask for the certificates?
So, yeah, thank you, madam, for a burning question. And I thank all the panelists also for participating. So, really, in my practice, if I have seen none, I think in last 12 years, I've asked that really, please show us the certificate or whatever. I think they are really not bothered, or probably there are certain kind of, because I work in a hospital-based lab, so probably there are certain kind of consumers which they already know. But I think majority of the customers we cater from rural areas, so they are really not aware of this certification or whatever. They just see the doctor, and even they don't, they will never ask your qualifications also. No, nobody does. They don't know that. They are not aware about that. As Dr. Rana said, basically consumer basically is not aware. For them, money pricing matters, I think. So now coming back to your question of the micro labs and the basic composite medium advanced labs. So a basic composite lab has, as per the Clinical Establishment Act, has 24. They can do 24 tests which are enumerated very clearly. So I think that kind of lab would not have resources to really go for to pay the fees for any certification or accreditation, because it costs too much. I think that is my personal view, because the fees should be the fees has to be low by the accreditation bodies. The fees is huge because you are flying. The assessors will fly to the city, come back or whatever, stay in the hotel. It is expensive. I have done 1 or 2 audits as a medical lab. Medical laboratory program for NAPH. So I myself thought that it is expensive because one has to fly, because assessor won't, for a single day audit, assessor won't travel for 3 days. So it is, the cost is a issue, I think, a major issue for any lab actually to go for any accreditation. So now, again, putting my views, if you see, we are talking of accreditation of labs, but that is a misnomer, because the NABL or anybody is accrediting the tests and not the lab. So once you get an RT-PCR accreditation, you say my lab is NABL accredited. That is wrong. That is misnomer, because you are only accredited for COVID, not COVID, but RT-PCR testing. But I will proudly go outside and claim I am NABL accredited, which is false advertising. It is false propaganda, I think. Now, yeah. Now, I would like to share certain points about the clinical establishment thing. So I think all the audience will be surprised to know that, as you are aware, Clinical Establishment Act for medical diagnostic laboratories, the minimum standards were notified on 18 May 2018. So and no lab till today in those 13 states and 5 union territories is permanently registered. So there is a provision in Clinical Establishment Act. Any lab has to first provisionally register, which only you go to the website, you fill up the form, send it, and you will get the provisional certification. So you don't need to, you just need to a declaration. You don't need to give any document, not even a single document, to prove that you are a clinical establishment. It is just on a paper thing, no verification, no audit, no nothing. So in India as of today, 12th November 2020, there is not even a single lab which is permanently registered. So for permanent registration, the authorities will come back to you and audit you. But for provisional registration, no audit. So till today, in India, no audit has been done by any regulatory authority of any lab. That will be a very surprising fact. Then another important thing is to tell you, as the minimum standards were notified on 18th May 2018. So there is a clause 23 in the Clinical Establishment Act which says, after the notification of any minimum standards, after notification of 2 years, all the labs have to be permanently registered. So all the labs which were provisionally registered in those states which have Clinical Establishment Act must have acquired provisional registration and should have been permanently registered by 18th May 2020. But it's shocking, no lab, even a single lab, is permanently registered. So they have they are not legally registered under Clinical Establishment Act as a permanent entity. So I mean, coming back to one thing, that accreditation is voluntary. I personally feel that either the minimum standard should be implemented, implementation is a problem, or accreditation should be made mandatory. But again, it costs. So cost is a major issue. Consumer is not aware. So these are the two big issues wherein the labs would not like to really go for accreditation, and consumer is not aware. They are not bothered. Only consumers in Delhi, Mumbai metros, they are aware, and that's it. And that also few, because I encounter so many of our colleagues who are well educated. They are not aware. They are not aware of all the mishappenings, whatever. They don't understand. It is as simple as that. So what do you?
Thank you so much. Dr. Keskar, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, short comment about this minimum standards and clinical establishment, because it is discussed too much. And I was the member of Clinical Establishment Act drafting committee for the Maharashtra, and I know that act in very detail. So preamble of that act is to register registration and regulation of clinical establishments, so that to improve the quality of clinical establishments or health services, so that the Article 47 or Article this can be fulfilled. So what that article is to achieve or to improve the health of a public at large. So whatever we are doing in Clinical Establishment Act is should be focused towards the improving the quality, not the diluting quality. And while classifying the Clinical Establishments Acts, medical diagnostic laboratories are classified in specialty and super specialty category, 26 category. And this specialty and super specialty category, again, they say that minimum standards will apply. Only medical consultant is not required for the small laboratory or small thing. Maybe a small laboratory is running for 5 patients or a single test, doing a single hemoglobin, doing a single sugar for 5 patients, 10 patients, 3 patients, 2 patients. Quality is required for that. Even that lab is running for a single person also, or single test also, or single sample also, the quality is required. Without quality, there should be no report. And these things, that basic minimum standards and all these things are diluting the quality standards, which were previously held. Previous quality standards were very high for the medical this diagnostic laboratories. And we also know that medical diagnostic laboratories cannot be run without a qualified pathologist with postgraduate qualification in pathology. And again, this in CEA also preamble and their classification also suggests the same thing, that the super specialty and specialty, it is a specialty and super specialty practice, and that has to be done by a medical consultant only in that specialty. But again, while classifying, again, it is somewhat biased and somewhat under pressure, and it is diluting the standards, whatever, which is not contraindicating the preamble of Clinical Establishment Act. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very nice last liners, Dr. Keskar. Maybe with this, I would like to ask my colleague Dinesh Ji. Dr. Keskar was mentioning that, at least that is what I could pick up, that earlier this segment had very high standards, and with this minimum standards now, with the minimum focus, minimum standards, there's a minimum quality focus, and they also feel that many things are kind of diluted. We used to joke around in the consulting corners. We had seen maximum quality, and then we went to accreditation, we came to certification, then we are talking about minimum quality now. Why is it that in the country we are having this minimum, maximum quality focus? Quality has only one. Is it a minimum, maximum quality? They're all saying there's not much of a accreditation or a certification, not much of a demand, because no referring doctor is asking for it, no patient is asking for it. That's being the scenario, honestly speaking. And maybe, is this one of the reasons, do you think that, from a maximum quality, things are actually slowly coming down? And now today, the focus is all about minimum standards, minimum quality across the country in many spheres, in many sectors. Why is it so? How can a quality be minimum? See, quality need not be a certification or an accreditation. The preamble, like Dr. Keskar says, it is for the health of the community. In the health of the community, the healthcare has got to be delivered in a certain fashion by a competent and expert personnel, then it has to be delivered like that. My question is, what is your view as a consultant, having seen the accreditations, having seen the certifications, having seen this minimum standards? We do have multiple accreditation standards and certification bodies and certification platforms. When there is no demand at all, do you really think the small pie of the market that everybody is trying to capture?
Thanks, Manpreet, for this forum. And I thank all the panelists as well as the members who are participating. And thank you to all of them. See, the basic problem when we're looking into the accreditation process or the certification process is the certification of the requirement or the need an individual is building on. The biggest problem which I feel in this area is the need and the legal requirement, regulatory requirements. Because no system in the world can exist unless there is a regulatory requirement. So there is no punishment for doing the wrong thing. So everyone can go scot-free even after doing the wrong. So that is very, very important part, which is basic as such in our country as well. Then when we come to the implementation of any type of regulatory, any type of requirement of the systems in an organization, the another concern which comes is the competency of the various people and their perceptions. The technical start with the changing of the environment, changing of the technologies, the equipments have become all automated type of equipment. So I feel that a lot of areas where we need not insist that the report should be signed by the pathologists, pathology test. If you take a small piece of example like in Japan, where the report, the routine test can be used by the technicians. With a certain background and with a certain qualifications and experience. So over here, when you look at it, everywhere the reporting has to be done by the pathologist. So the lab has to deploy a pathologist. Secondly, when we look at the how many hours a pathologist has to be there, the system is totally silent. Now the question is, and then you look at an illegal application, we should have a pathologist, we should have a full-time pathologist, and we should have a backup pathologist. A small lab cannot afford the two pathologists. So effectively that the pathologists need to sell their signature. We can sell to use my name and that is it. So we have to build a system and things more practical to implement and follow. Whenever we make the systems more complicated, people will always try to say to have to take a small shortcuts and bypass systems. So that is what one understand things is there. Second is the cost part. When you look at the cost of the accreditation or the certification, especially at an illegal accreditation, it becomes quite expensive as such. Because of the running of the controls and in the new guidelines, when we have mentioned that whether you run 5,000 tests a day for a particular analyte or you run one test, you have to run the level of controls. So those type of things is again playing on the system and people do not want to go far. The need for the that the people are waiting for the accreditation is only because of the demand from the market and demand from the corporate or the the day this corporate and the government refuse or remove this demand that you should illegal immediately. Even in illegal accredited labs, many labs will just close down. If they are not closed down, they will surrender the accreditation because they are doing it only on the compulsion. And that's point which is raised by one of the panelists, the quality part. Let me assure you that I've been working with many labs and all my customers, except I always say that a few times I can say that yes, they are not improved on it, but most of the customers, after implementing the quality, they always say that yes, it has improved, it has helped them in giving the better quality and they have better satisfaction, right from top to the bottom line. So this is one thing which has to, it is always a top-down exercise where the owners, the proprietors, you have to understand the quality and you have to appreciate it. The organization is appreciated, we are always getting a benefit of implementing the system. So we have to go in a proper way. Another thing to look at is the audit part. Normally in India, when we talk about an audit, everyone says an audit of inspection is basically something which is not expected and it is not going to be a smooth path. It is going to be a problem. And so now we ask the question. I still remember that in 2002, when the first lab was accredited, I facilitated the first lab. We got the doctors or assessors like Dr. Kanak Sarapati. When he came and there was a gap in the particular lab because we were going for the first time. He said that yes, the lab has good exactly by 15189 guidelines and NEPL 112 guidelines, and you will not be able to do this. But the question is not recommended. The question is whether we encourage the lab to go in for NEPL accreditation. And believe me, he accredited the lab, and the lab today is one of the best labs in the country. I would not like to name the lab, but it is regarded as the best lab and the quality as the so it is also required that when the accreditation auditors, when the assessors, when they help for an audit, we have to be on the back in the other perspective. We should encourage the lab and we should see the motive behind the whole exercise. If we think that the lab is positive, the management is positive, then the approach will also be positive instead of just putting the light on that during the assessment. Another problem which I have seen is the cost. And that is the cost. It is the doctors, the referral doctors is the biggest hurdle in giving quality in the system because of the internal vested interest. So when the vested interest are there, it goes out, so the lab is hardly left with good amount of the money to put the systems in place. So that is another thing which the pathologists have to come out and stop giving the cuts to the referral doctors. And unless the pathologists, unless we come together, to join hands together to start stopping this cut systems in the referral doctors, the quality I don't expect is going to be will get implemented in the lab. In the larger country. So this is the few things which I am looking at. I guess yes, there should be a punishment as far as the punishment part is concerned. If something is not doing that, or giving the wrong report intentionally. See, when we're giving the report, one also needs to look in the whole exercise is the report which goes out through the system, and there could be unintentional or something like this is a false meeting somewhere. So one has to appreciate that also. So one has to look into the system and then decide. Industry, wherever I am doing, I find them that yes, they are more intelligent, they want to go for the system, they feel better about the whole thing, and they feel enlightened that yes, we have been able to put the systems in place, which is going to help me out, it is going to help me in the legal compliances or the legal cases. So those things are always there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dineshji. Thank you for those good insights. Second round of question, a quick question to each one of you, because generally I think Jauhari sir will know and Dr. Rana will know that globally they do annual, at least, a periodical assessment of the quality infrastructure in the country. At least, globally there is this format, the countries will do their own self-evaluation of the quality infrastructure. I just wanted to understand from Mr. Jauhari and from Dr. Rana also, like, is there any such practice that we have in our country that, the quality infrastructure, maybe let us say medical testing laboratories program as an accreditation body or a certification bodies, do you all collectively evaluate the infrastructure and kind of do a SWOT and then submit it to the policy makers, whether it is CEA or the government or the ministries, to influence them to take the right decisions? Is that practice there in our country? Question to Mr. Jauhari sir, muted.
Actually, no, there is no such practice. There is no such practice elsewhere also, really speaking. What happens elsewhere is when they go into regulations, there is a concept called regulatory impact assessment. It's a formal activity in EU, mandated by law in many countries, that when you bring in a regulation, you must, before you bring in a regulation, you must do what is called a regulatory impact assessment, which determines, among other things, the availability of infrastructure, which also determines what kind of model to use, whether it's a high risk or a low risk area, whether we can have a light regulation or an intensive regulation. So there is a formal activity elsewhere, but it kicks in when regulation is to be made. It doesn't kick in general for what is the infrastructure in a particular country.
Okay, because some of the countries I had seen that, I was just reading that they do this kind of an assessment and then which is used for influencing some right policy decisions. I wanted to understand, because why I'm asking this question is the second round is very focused one on the recent COVID scenario, testing scenario, at least RT-PCR testing that was mandated. If we have this practice of periodically, at least, evaluating our own quality infrastructure in the country, we could have at least influenced our regulator. Recently, the COVID testing, the regulator who has defined all these things was ICMR, right? What was prescribed as a spec and then what was actually happening at the marketplace, there was an absolute disconnect. Then this actually made us realize that, at an apex body at a regulatory level, when they were prescribing certain things, if they are not really aware of the quality infrastructure in a medical testing laboratories, if they were prescribing a COVID testing, at least the nearest one is an RT-PCR, what was the infrastructure that was available? At least, this is a pandemic. I fully agree that, things may not be available. But then that is what has actually prompted me to ask this question. Do we at least do a SWOT year on year? At least as an apex bodies, you all have to do it, is what I feel. So at least nearest scenario that any such scenario, emergencies, we will know whether we are capable. We're talking about so much about accreditation, certifications, quality. The regulator only said one thing, the testing has to be quality and safe testing. So only accredited labs are empowered to do it. That's it. But all of us in the industry know that, self-evaluation, this particular test calls for a lot of competency of the medical professional who is doing the test. And what we are seeing at the ground level is the laboratories, the smallest lab is also certified, accredited today. I don't want to say certified, at least it is accredited. The smallest lab in the country is accredited, and honestly speaking, how many of those are run by a competent person as a pathologist or a lab medicine professional? And then what is the criteria that the regulator has defined and what is actually happening at the ground level? These are two different things. The tiniest labs names that we are picking up. See, again, as consultants, we will never go wrong with all this. We know what's happening at the marketplace. The kind of names that are popping up and hitting our faces, like we know for sure that, they're not even eligible and cannot even qualify. Okay, there is a pandemic, there is a crisis, but do they all have really pathologists or competent medical professionals to do the testing? Sorry, no, they don't have. So this is what I just wanted to ask the second, my second question is only focus on that is, this was a spec given by the regulator. Okay, and saying that, all these laboratories have to be accredited, certified and things like that. As I will ask this question to Dr. Keskar first, as a practicing pathologist. On one side, I was seeing laboratories which are run by professionals sitting there practicing pathologists didn't qualify for this at all. And just because they didn't have the accreditation status, but accreditation is not quality, right? This particular test calls for a highest competency based on which the hospitalization, the treatment is given. Why is it? Please, I would like to have your views actually. Did this regulatory requirement announcement really result in helping the patients, the communities at the right time?
To be in short, that actually disrupted the things. The person like me sitting in a place like Paint, where the population is 50,000 and surrounding population including 2 lakhs. Total, I'm catering a population of around 2 lakhs. If I would have allowed to give the testing authority, then I would have gone for the not total PCR setup, but at least cartridge-based PCR setup. And then I would have helped a lot of patients and I would have controlled epidemic in a better way in my area at least. And there are pathologists in each area where they don't have accreditation. I don't say I'm not competent enough to get an accreditation, but I'm not willing to go for accreditation. That is the difference. I follow all the SOPs and all the records of ISO 15189. But only difference in my lab and accredited lab is that I have not gone for the third party this thing process. So quality standards which are necessary that we are maintaining, but we are not, and there is a reason for that. Why we are not going for accreditation, willfully not going for accreditation, because there are a lot of loopholes in accreditation system also, and they are allowing such a huge mushroom lab. What you said, tiniest lab is also accredited, and the laboratories which are working for business only, they are accredited. And once antigen test came into picture, initially ICMR's policy was that only accredited lab will do the. Yes. Then we strongly objected that policy. Yes. We have Dr. Sandeep Yadav and myself, we had written to the ICMR and we said that accredited labs are 200 kilometers away from that, away from our place, and how the sample will go to that laboratory and how they will test, as the test is to be done within 20 minutes. How it is possible? Then they have to review the policy, and then they said that it is on the state government authority to give the licenses. And really say Dr. Sandeep Yadav and myself were the first persons to receive the permission for antigen test in our area, and we could help this epidemic a lot in this. We were doing day and night testing. We have forgotten our meals and dinners and everything, and we could really help this with the antigen testing. We could have done this 3 months before also. So that is the thing.
I agree that few months actually got lost by the time they came out with these announcements on antigen testing and all that, because I was wondering, we do have a certification system which is issued by NABH. There's another board, parallel board, which was not even considered actually. And at least that is when I felt, the structure was very clearly presented to the regulator. At least you could have given the options, nearest lab, smallest places. Even that certification by NABH did not percolate or penetrate into all parts of the country. It was not widely distributed. That is what I felt. And at the end of the day, communities wanted a good tested report by a competent person, and that objective was not met. And this is the discussion which was going everywhere. At the marketplace, at the ground level, and that is why I just pointedly wanted to have that discussion today. I also wanted to ask one question to Dr. Rana, being another accreditation body. As consultants, we were not happy about the molecular testing accreditation that is granted in the recent. Yes, of course, there is a pandemic, there is an emergency. I fully agree. I'm not denying that. And boards were only obliging to the request given by the regulator. But that has also kind of created a different signal at the marketplace that, accreditation is allowed, possible to achieve in about a few weeks' time. Molecular testing is an accreditation which is given now, at least in the last 3-4 months, we have seen close to about 500-600 labs which are newly accredited only for molecular testing, right? All got the accreditation in about 3 to 4 weeks' time, max.
Yeah.
As another parallel accreditation body in the country, isn't it what is called lowering the benchmarks? Because we are facing the music at the marketplace as a consultant. Okay, fine, accreditations now can be obtained in about 3 weeks' time. Do you think it should have been an accreditation, or it could have been an empanelment as such, a provisional empanelment that is granted based on assessing those laboratories on a basic criteria? Why is an ISO 15189 being used?
Thank you so much. Very dangerous questions you ask me, but I would be talking what I feel like, being an accreditation body and a competitor, I would say, though QI accreditation has not been approved, despite our communication 100 times with ICMR. See, many labs then approach us for this PCR testing. I say we are not yet approved, and we have, I think, declined over 50 laboratories because we were not approved. I say there is no point coming to us because we are not approved. The only question which you raise is the important is, and I come back to you, when you go for accreditation for simple glucose test, before COVID, how much time a lab was taking to get accreditation? Simple glucose test, 3 months, 6 months, maybe more, or whatever it is. So what happened to the policy or the process or the standards during COVID time, that molecular testing, which is RT-PCR, and I challenge many RT-PCR people who are handling the labs. I have done RT-PCR myself during my doctorate and postdoctorate. Even people have not seen machine thermal cycler at that time. That this require a very, very, very critical competence. Okay. And even forget about competence. You consider you require same competence as you did for hemoglobin or sugar. Consider the same. But when a lab gets accreditation as for hemoglobin or sugar for say 2 months or 3 months, how it is possible to get a lab accredited in 2 days, 3 days, 1 week or 2 weeks? So that's a big question people should ask themselves. bodies should ask themselves that how it is happened. Now, coming back to the policy of ICMR, they should have not done it, and the accreditation body should have not accepted it. Because if you know your process takes implementing the QMS, say 3 weeks or 4 weeks time or even 1 month, at least that much time should be given that yes, you should start putting that system in place. We'll come and look at it. That minimum time must have been prescribed by the accreditation body to ICMR. Because ICMR will simply say, so they will say they want something authenticity in a non-private, non-governmental system. For government system, they don't want any accreditation. That is, everything is accepted in the government. But for private, they wanted to be an accredited laboratory. So they should have discussed it, and the accreditation body should have advised them that this is the process. Minimum time would take, say, 1 month, max on war footing, 1 month, and that should have been adhered to. What should have been done and done in many other countries, that should have been a sort of either you call approval system, emergency approval. Now there are emergency approval for medical devices, medical drugs going on around the world. Emergency approval sought by CDC or something from FDA or from whatever it is. There should have been some mechanism developed, not using ISO 15189 name as an accreditation, because that would, give like, now to me, if we got approval from say ICMR, and this question I ask myself, if we got approval from ICMR, how we would be doing it, dealing with it? Means I would ask the laboratory to give me the quality manual, give me all these policies, you give me all these procedure, do a internal audit, do a management review meeting, and then only you will qualify to and get an accreditation with all these things done. So what we are going to do if we got an approval, minimum certain. So I think that should have been a discussion amongst all the people who were, organization involved, come out with a policy on, yes, let it be an approval system, because in emergency we need some labs to come up over a period of time to test this virus and develop technical competency. But now it's 900 plus laboratories in over last 6 months. 900 plus laboratories go, and many laboratories, to be very honest, few laboratories which we have accredited, they are only doing basic tests, and they say we want to go for RT-PCR and you are not approved, so we will go to NABL. I say, yes, you must go to NABL, because that is the only accreditation body approved at the moment. So this is your business perspective. You should go, because we are not able to give you that approval system. So please go ahead for that. Now you can think that a small lab who were struggling to get accreditation for basic things, now aiming to get accreditation for 15189 for ICPCR test. It's good to see aspiration, but I think there should have been some mechanism, not diluting the standard. I'm not saying it has been diluted, but they have to look at it. What mechanism will it continue for many other tests in future? A lab will come and apply and they get in 3 days or 4 days or 5 days for non-COVID testing. So I think that some balance should have been in place, so that people should have a confidence that yes, ISO 151 means minimum these things. You need at least 3 weeks to fix all documentation, then come up and then you apply, and you may get in 1 month and 2 months, not a problem. But I think that's need, and I know Philippines has done it. They have government approval system, and though they have an accreditation system, they only have 4 or 5 laboratories ISO 15189. So they go beyond. They have now 120 laboratories for COVID testing doing RT-PCR, not accredited, but they have a system in place to approve based on their infrastructure to conduct the test. And I think, and like it is back to the Johri sir's question, basically is linked with that, and you ask that whether the regulator or the government do a gap analysis before prescribing anything under regulations. For example, like IRDA said, entry level is must for next 1 year, then 1 year extension, then 1 year extension. Now it has seen 3 extensions. You know that there are 100,000 hospitals existing. They won't get even entry level certification in 1 year or 2 years, but you prescribe it. So I think that prescription should be with the reality what exists, and also a mechanism to support that, so that they know what is supposed to be done, and they should not just run and try to get a piece of paper as a certificate, but making a balance of certificate, quality, and the requirements. I think that is what I feel is that, but I think Johri sir would like to add something.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at the watch also, because I have a program at 6.
We have a program. We'll just wind up with this round itself, sir. Actually,
just a concluding comment to add to what Dr. Rana said. certainly in an emergency situation, there is a need for certain kind of facilities or labs or agencies. ICMR would have been well advised to create a provisional system for approval. If I was in place, I would have created a provisional. I've done it as CEO NABCB. I did for more than one regulator. Create a provisional system, say that within 1 year you will get formal accreditation based on a very simple criteria which assures competence. Because what we need is at the end of the day in an inspection body or a certification body or in a lab is competence. And competence is a function of man, machine, as we say, 3 M's. So I would have created a simple criteria for provisional approval of labs and asked NABL to do it, or NABL should have suggested, and put a condition that you get accreditation within 1 year's time. By insisting on accreditation as a basis for regulation right from day one is going to undermine accreditation. I have no doubt about that. It is going to undermine accreditation. So if as an accreditation body chief, I have to preserve the sanctity of my accreditation, I would tell the regulator, I'm sorry, no, accreditation cannot be done in this time, but yes, to help you, I will create a system. So he doesn't have the competence. The regulators typically do not have the competence. They don't understand how to approve third-party bodies. We know as accreditation bodies, we know how to assess them. What are the key things which should be assessed? So it is possible to create a provisional system, a simplified criteria, do a quick assessment and approve people, and then let the system operate, which is what I would have done. I think with that, I would at least like that we conclude here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Maybe, yeah. With this round, I'll just ask one question to Dr. Rohit Jain quickly. The same question even I had. In the minimum standards itself, this RT-PCR testing comes under that super specialty category. It was very beautifully defined, actually. They could have simply connected this to that minimum standard specification, and they could have ensured that this facility was thrown open to many of the labs across the country. Unfortunately, that did not happen. It was directly connected to an accreditation, and I just wanted to have your views on that quickly.
So it was RT-PCR comes only in the advanced category of labs.
Yes.
So
yes.
we really don't know, as Dr. Rana himself said, that 10 years, like last year we had 1100 labs in India. Now today we have 2000. So that itself actually explains what kind of accreditation we are granting to the labs. I mean, is it so easy? And that is all I want to say. I mean, we need to really elevate these standards, not the minimum, but we need to have maximum standards.
See, at the end of the day, the ecosystem should be inspired by the certifications and accreditations, and at the end of the day, that is what matters. And my last quick question to Dinesh ji, quickly the same question I'm extending to you, at least since you're also working at the field level for this RT-PCR testing. A quick this thing of your feedback as a consultant, this quick accreditations, awarding accreditations quickly in a pandemic scenario, has it really conveyed a good message to the industry, or a distorted message to the industry? I just wanted your views quickly on this, please. Thank you.
See, I have a mixed opinion on this. The basic problem which has come up in the approval of an RT-PCR application is that they're insisting that it should be RNA, basically an RNA testing, which could be HCV or H1N1. And in the current scenario, because of the COVID testing, the kits are not available, and we don't have the positive samples also for the 2 things. What most of the labs have done is they just established a facility. Someone has managed to get the certificate, managed to get a sample for the positive HCV or H1N1, and goes for the audit. Go to the audit, then only after that you are allowed to do COVID testing. The current scenario is what I feel is that when they do the accreditation of any of the lab, they are only doing the basic front-end establishment, the facilities is there or not, and the competency of the technicians and that of the doctors who are going to do the reporting. So that is a very problem which I feel we are facing in this particular sector as of now. If you have one energy for the COVID testing, we certainly commitment from the lab or maybe undertaking from the lab that they can set up the facility for COVID testing but they do not do the reporting to get accredited. That could have been a better approach for this at this particular pandemic situation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for those rich engagement and conversations. And maybe I guess I will stop with these 2 rounds of questions, which were very elaborate in nature. And maybe what is required, just my one closing comment or an observation is, the ecosystem should be so inspiring in such a manner that, it should inspire all the stakeholders to come forward and adopt, whether it is a certification or an accreditation. Even after 20 plus years, if we have seen that, it's not growing, it's not moving up, then definitely it is high time for the accreditation bodies and certification bodies to sit across the table, have key discussions with the stakeholders, take the stakeholders into confidence, rework, go back and rework and revisit and redo and see that what is needed at the ground level, what is needed, because at the end of the day, even in the urban population communities, no, they don't know anything about your NABL certificate or whatever it is. At the end of the day, it's used as a marketing tool, honestly speaking, though it's a more powerful framework actually, but nobody knows about all this. So to make it more inspiring, to take everybody into confidence, it's not just about numbers, but just about 1,000 labs seeking quality voluntarily, because there is no mandatory compulsion now. It is voluntarily. Out of the 3 lakhs laboratories or whatever it is, the numbers that we are all talking about, is something is seriously wrong somewhere. And maybe this is the time where we all have to join hands and go back to the policy makers and make them understand, because healthcare needs quality. Patients need quality care and safe care. And this quality and safety has to be evaluated by a third party all the time. Otherwise, every organization will claim that they are offering global quality services. So third-party evaluation is a must, but what should be the methodology, what should be the program is something which there has to be a relook. That is why I was insisting upon a SWOT on the quality infrastructure in the country. Maybe this is the time on the, today is the day, maybe we all have to really meet and brainstorm often, just to impress upon the policy makers to have a revisit and a relook on the conformity assessment structure that is introduced long back. Quality is here, and it's on a voluntary basis. Healthcare as a services space, they always seek many things on a voluntary basis, is something what my experience had shown. But when it's not happening, even after 20 years, something is pulling back and something is flawed somewhere actually. Maybe that needs to be corrected. So I just wanted to thank once again the associations who have come forward, and Dr. Sandeep Yadav is here. I'd seen him coming. Thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Yeah.
Thank you. And there's one person where I always reach out to him for anything, and he says, "We are here to help you, ma'am. Any industry engagement, call us. We are ready." And Dr. Keskar, I just sent him a message. He said, "We are there. We will be there." And Dr. Rohit Jain, of course, Dr. Rana. So I would like to thank all the participants and audience for the time that you have taken away from your routine. And Mr. Jowhari sir, of course, sir is our mentor. So any such industry engagements and sessions, we keep taking sir's help also, because wherever the corrections and improvements are required, sir also will contribute his fair share and in communicating the message. So thank you so much. Thank you once again to each one.
Thank you very
all
much.
of you.
Thank you so much.
So happy World Quality Day again. So
Happy
let's
Diwali.
celebrate
Thank you.
quality.
Same to you.
Happy
Diwali
Diwali
to
too.
all.
Happy
Stay
Diwali.
safe.
Diwali too.
Happy Diwali.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.